Coming back to one of our top stories, the Hawks have denied fresh allegations that it tried to incriminate Ipid head Robert McBride. This comes after a former policeman claimed he was approached by Hawks investigator Mani Free. Earlier this month, let's get reaction from Ipid head Robert McBride, who joins us in the studio. Mr. McBride, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, we know that on Thursday, the Police Minister, Nathi Nhleko, asked Parliament to establish an inquiry. You, of course, being the subject of this inquiry, what are your thoughts? And is the Minister on a witch hunt?
Well, if I understand correctly, the idea of starting an inquiry is so that I can be suspended again, so that I can be removed from the workplace, so that supposedly fearful witnesses can now testify and that the prosecuting authority can now resume prosecution. Now, my position on that is the NPA is an independent body. It can decide on its own whether to resume prosecution or to initiate prosecution without any other processes to consider. It can do it on its own. An interesting assumption has to be made that somehow the minister is aware of what the National Prosecuting Authority will do. But I think it's an abuse of processes, because for 18 months I was suspended. After 7 months on trial without a single shred of evidence being laid, the National Prosecuting Authority withdrew the case against me because there were no witnesses. Now, that's an indication there is no evidence. And from the onset, I said there is no evidence and the case would collapse. The case has collapsed. And so due processes, everyone has the right to speedy and fair trial and no interference by anybody else. I see the attempt to remove the head of Ipid through this process as interference in the independence of Ipid. As the executive director, I have to defend the independence of Ipid.
Well, this is very interesting. I mean, you're freshly back in the saddle. So, I mean, this would be an odd time to ask you, but are you feeling secure then in your position? I mean, given the possible disciplinary action and, of course, given the relationship that you and Minister Nhleko, or lack of relationship that you and Minister Nhleko seem to have?
Well, I think the first issue is that in terms of the Constitutional Court judgment, which was a confirmation of the High Court judgment, the executive director of Ipid needs to have security of tenure. He can't be looking over his shoulder when he conducts, guides and directs investigations. So the issue is, but the relationship between me and anybody else is not important in ensuring that I have investigations that are conducted without fear, favor, or prejudice. So relationship, if someone doesn't like the outcome of an investigation, I can't do anything about that. The investigations, we endeavor to make them, with the impartial, with the due diligence, with the integrity that it requires, without regard to anybody else's uncomfortable feelings. So my job description doesn't require me to have a good relationship with anybody.
What do you make of Minister Nhleko's statement that he's not aware of the Hawks investigation against you? Do you feel that that's disingenuous? And also backed by the fact that he says, the Hawks is an independent body in the first place?
Well, I think the first issue is I think you should ask him about that. So I wouldn't comment on that. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't comment on that.
All right, well, let's go to an important issue. I mean, talk to us about the murder of the alleged cash heist gangster, Mr. Marcos Singh, while you were the head of the Ekurhuleni Metro Police 10 years ago. Firstly, what do you make of the fact that this is popping up 10 years later? But before we get there, this has clearly become a thorn in your side, right? So take us back and tell us what happened there, and is there no reason at all that the Hawks should reopen that case if they are indeed reopening that case? And why would the minister be pushing for this if indeed he is for the reopening of this particular case? Tell us exactly what happened. Was there nothing untoward there?
Well, there was a number of officers who were involved in the arrest and the subsequent usage, illegal usage of a motor vehicle which was confiscated in that process. And the investigation into the cash in transit heist allegations was conducted jointly with members of crime intelligence. An arrest was made, there was resistance to arrest, and charges were laid against the suspect. The suspect had been spotted in a number of cash in transit heists or involvement to some extent. The officers who were then involved with the illegal usage of the car were then charged internally, internal disciplinary, at which I testified at. The officers then got dismissed, and that was the end of the story. But what had happened in between, the same officers were used to change the statements about a single motor vehicle accident that I had in 2006. So one that exonerated me, and then they were held over a barrel about the issue relating to the usage of illegal usage of the car.
Yeah.
So that's what happened. So that case has got nothing to do with me, and they can try and do whatever they want to. Smoke and mirrors cannot change the truth.
Now, what do you make, or what do you know rather, about the former Metro policemen that are being approached apparently to implicate you? Obviously, they can't be named, as we have said in our bulletins earlier at this stage. But have you been in contact with these former police officers?
No,
what is this about?
I have no idea what it's about, yeah.
All right.
I haven't heard anything about it.
And, you know, it seems quite bizarre, and I wonder if it's bizarre as well for members of the public, where we have a situation where it seems that, you know, two police investigative wings are sort of investigating members of one another. We know that Ipid will now be investigating the police commissioner, Khomoso Phahlane. Don't you think that that's a bit strange for members of the public?
Well, the mandate of Ipid is to have investigative oversight over the police. That's its sole purpose for existence. And that involves criminal investigations and investigations of misconduct. That's its job. That's why it's there. The subject of our investigations are policemen.
And what structures do you have to appeal to if indeed you feel that this is some kind of a political ploy against you?
Well, the issue is always, and we've seen in recent times, the courts have always come to our defense. So it's important to consider all options. But I'm also quite confident that the matter will be resolved, and people will reject abuses of processes.
You've asked for independent commission of inquiry into the Hawks. Why do you feel that an independent commission of inquiry is needed into these kinds of structures?
Well, I'd indicated that a independent commission of inquiry and a judicial commission of inquiry are called for the whole situation of the problems in the criminal justice system. I made statements, I alleged connivance between certain elements in the NPA and certain elements in the Hawks. And if you've seen recently the view expressed with the withdrawal of charges against the Minister of Finance, that the head of the Hawks appeared to be quite angry and encouraged the head of the NPA to continue with the prosecution, even though there was a problem with the prosecution, as essential evidence was withheld. That alone should ask for an inquiry. It is the Minister of Finance we're talking about. There has been financial hemorrhaging as a result of this long issue.
Yeah.
Now, if you remember, Shadrach Sibiya was charged with fraud at the beginning of the year and went to court, and there was no evidence. And the prosecutor then said, well, he knew there was no evidence when the magistrate asked him, but he was given instructions from above. The same applied to Minister Gordhan. The same applied to us. We said from the inception, there is no case, there exists no evidence. They went ahead insisting that they had a case, and they withdraw it because there's no evidence. Now, you cannot go for the head of independent institutions. You cannot go for the Minister of Finance lightly for anything, and then to go there half-cocked without any evidence. That's problematic, and hence I say there needs to be a judicial commission of inquiry.
It seems that you're suggesting that there is some sort of political interference when it comes to the NPA and the Hawks. Why do you believe that strongly?
Well, whether it is or it isn't, it's important that public perceptions see it as it is. Now, clearly, you will go and look on your reaction to the story and on the social media, and the public perception is that it is undue political interference. The idea to get Parliament, one leg of the state, to start a process so that I could be suspended, to start another process which has come to an end of prosecution. And this request is made by a minister of cabinet. The issue of the involvement of the head of the DPCI, vehemently encouraging the head of the NPA to prosecute the Minister of Finance. What is the agenda? Is there an innocent explanation for it? For all of this that's taken place, that has kept our country on tenterhooks for so long. Is there an innocent explanation? Can there be? It's unlikely.
I want to go back to this issue of the police commissioner, Mr. Patlan. We understand that Paul O'Sullivan accompanied the IPID to the commissioner's house. Are you aware of this? And if true, why was this the case? Why did this happen?
Well, my understanding is that Paul O'Sullivan is the complainant. You know, very often when you're an investigator, you require the assistance of a complainant. That's normal. Why should people find it strange? It's normal all the time. It's done every day by policemen. Yeah.
What is lost when these institutions are fighting each other? I mean, when the Hawks and the Ipid are having issues with each other. I mean, for the public, I mean, surely something is lost here when other things, when bigger issues that are of public interest, of course, should be taken care of by these very important bodies.
Well, Ipid is fighting no one. Ipid is fighting against corruption and other aspects.
Well, I mean, you would say that, but if one was to speak to a member of perhaps the Hawks, they would say something different, wouldn't they, sir?
Well, I don't know what the Hawks would say. Maybe you should get General Ntameza here and ask him. But we are not fighting against anyone. We act on receipt of complaints. Our mandate is protected by the Constitution, and it is our existence is given birth to by the Constitution. The Constitutional Court has confirmed our mandate and our independence. We will conduct our investigations without fear or favor or prejudice to anyone. We will go ahead with our investigations. The fact that some people don't like the way we do our investigations, it's their prerogative. But it is normal for complainants to assist with investigations that investigators are conducting.
Just as a closing, where do you see this all playing out? I mean, with this possible inquiry by Parliament, what do you think will happen, and specifically to you in this situation?
Well, I don't know. I mean, during this coming week, I will be taking legal advice and ascertain whether it is necessary or not, or see what happens. But my firm belief is that it's an abuse of processes, and it's a bit of a jump in logic also. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for speaking to us. We appreciate your time, Mr. McBride. That's, of course, the IPID head, Mr. Robert McBride.